There's one number almost nobody calculates before buying a home in Canada. What happens if prices drop 50%? Not your mortgage, not your payments, your net worth. Because when you buy with leverage, the price can fall, but the debt stays the same. And this matters most in the places that look the strongest, the beautiful towns, the hidden gems, the neighborhoods that feel like they're booming. Because places don't collapse overnight. They thin out. A few more for sale signs, a few more empty rentals, a few more dark windows, until one day, something feels off. So here's the real question. How fragile are you? If the market stops being kind, Canada didn't just experience rising home prices. It built a system where housing became the main wealth engine, powered by cheap debt, maximum borrowing, and a cultural belief that real estate doesn't really go down in a way that matters. By 2022, the average home price was around $746,000, against roughly $92,000 in household income, about an 8-to-1 price-to-income ratio. In healthier markets, people start getting nervous around 4:1. At those levels, the market stops being driven by vibes. It's driven by math. And here's the key. When the cost of debt changes, the entire structure has to reprice, because the real gatekeeper is not the listing price, it's the monthly payment. That's the door. And when that door gets heavier, fewer people can push it open. Now, if this were just one pressure, the market could absorb it. But what makes this moment feel different is that several forces are stacking at the same time, and they reinforce each other. Force number 1, the mortgage renewal shock, 2025 to 2026. Over the next couple of years, roughly 1.2 million mortgages renew in that window. Many of those households locked in around 1.5% to 2.5% and are rolling into something like 4.5% to 6%. That's not a small adjustment. That's a lifestyle change. For a lot of people, it means an extra $400 to $800 per month. And in places where mortgages are huge, it can be more. Some households can handle that. Many can't, especially once you add everything else that got more expensive. And this is where markets change character. Because forced sellers don't sell because they feel bearish. They sell because the budget breaks. They sell because their options collapse. They don't wait for the perfect buyer, the perfect season, the perfect rebound. They need liquidity. And when enough forced sellers show up at the margin, the market doesn't need panic to move. It just needs pressure. Force number 2. The population narrative is reversing. For a while, Canada's housing story had a simple line in it. Demand will always be there. In 2023, Canada added over 1 million international students, temporary foreign workers, and new permanent residents. Bulls treated that as a permanent floor under demand. Then policy and economics intervened. International student visas were capped in 2024, approvals tightened, and many students already here began leaving. Not necessarily because they wanted to, but because the cost of living made staying irrational. And this isn't about arguing immigration policy. This is about the story the market priced in. If demand growth was part of what justified peak pricing, then demand shifting, even slightly, is part of what can unwind peak pricing. In markets stretched this far, slightly can matter a lot. Force number 3. The remote work premium is being unwound. During the pandemic, buyers bid up secondary markets on the assumption that remote work was permanent. Distance stopped feeling like a cost. People paid a premium for space, for views, for a lifestyle. Then reality started tugging back. By 2024, many major employers moved to return to office requirements, often 3 days per week. And that turns affordable far away into sell or commute, right when prices have already softened in many of those areas. The point isn't that remote work disappears. The point is that the premium people paid for distance stops making sense when distance becomes expensive again, financially, emotionally, and in time. And when that premium disappears, the places that were priced like dreams can start behaving like trades. Force number 4. Municipal budgets are getting squeezed. This one doesn't get enough attention, but it's quietly brutal. Many municipalities rely heavily on development charges, fees, collected when builders pull permits. When construction slows, that revenue drops. Then cities face 3 unappealing options: raise property taxes, cut services, or borrow. In practice, it's often a mix. And that means, even if your mortgage stayed the same, your cost of owning may not. Taxes creep, fees change, services degrade. The carrying cost of living in a place rises. So these four forces stack: higher payments, shifting demand, a retreat from distance, and rising municipal pressure. They aren't sequential. They overlap. They amplify. And when that happens, markets can look fine on the surface, until suddenly they don't. Because housing doesn't usually break from the top, it fails at the base. The base is the first-time buyer and the marginal buyer, the people stretching to get in, plus investors relying on financing and rent math. When rates rose rapidly, that base stopped buying, not because they changed their minds, but because affordability changed the rules. Once the base stops absorbing supply, pressure builds everywhere else. Then, the chain reaction starts. Forced sellers appear when renewals hit and payments jump. Investors sell together when rent math breaks and vacancy rises, because holding becomes a monthly loss instead of an asset. Supply arrives at the wrong time via pre-construction completions and assignment listings. Sellers resist price discovery by delisting instead of cutting, which can make the market look stable, while stress keeps building underneath. And when repricing arrives in a leveraged market, it can move fast, not because everyone panics, but because leverage doesn't unwind politely. Now let's make this real with 3 places, because Canada isn't one market. Different places crack in different ways. And for a channel that cares about beautiful towns and the way places feel over time, this is where the story becomes tangible. 1. Toronto, Ontario. Toronto is a real city with a diversified job base, but its housing market, especially condos, is exposed in a very specific way. There's a massive pre-construction pipeline, about 100,000 condo units, completing into a rate environment that makes closing difficult for many buyers who signed earlier. That's a steady flow of supply arriving at the worst possible time. At the same time, investors who counted on smooth appreciation and reliable renters are meeting rising vacancy and legal complexity around tenancy rules, while resale supply increases through assignment listings and investor selling. And when supply rises while confidence falls, markets don't need a headline crash to slide. They just need enough motivated sellers at the margin. In a condo-heavy market, that margin can be surprisingly thin. 2. Brampton, Ontario. Brampton saw dramatic price acceleration during 2020 to 2022. Detached homes that sold around $600,000 in 2019, crossing $1.2 million by early 2022. That kind of move is extremely sensitive to interest rates, because it's not just price growth. It's affordability stretched to the limit. Add high household debt loads, then layer on renewals in 2025 to 2026, and you get a market where financial stress can turn into listings quickly, especially if income stability weakens at the same time. In that setup, the market doesn't need everyone to sell. It only needs enough people to be unable to hold. And when that happens, a place can go from hot to heavy, faster than people expect. 3. Kelowna, British Columbia. Kelowna became a symbol of pandemic migration. Prices surged, with a median home price crossing $800,000 in 2022 against a household income around $85,000, close to a 10-to-1 ratio. But Kelowna's economy is more seasonal and tourism-linked than large metro areas, and return-to-office policies pull demand back toward Vancouver and Calgary. On top of that, rising insurance costs, especially wildfire-related, can increase carrying costs just as exit prices soften. That combination is where the risk lives: higher monthly costs, weaker demand, and less room to just wait it out. And this is how the beautiful place story can turn. Not because the beauty disappears, but because the economics of living there stop working for enough people at once. So what do you do with this, without turning your life into a spreadsheet? This is not financial advice, but it is a framework for thinking clearly when a market is shifting. First, run a rent versus own comparison without ego. In a declining market, owning builds wealth isn't automatically true. Compare renting versus the potential loss from price declines, plus the risk carried by debt. The point isn't to win a debate, it's to know what you're paying for, shelter or risk. Second, understand what forced sale environments do to timing. In down markets, the earliest sellers often take smaller losses than those who wait for a rebound that may not arrive on a human timeline, especially in places facing stacked pressures. Waiting can feel safer. In leveraged markets, waiting is also a bet. Third, think geographically and structurally. Capital doesn't have to stay in the most expensive, most leveraged markets. There are Canadian cities with lower price-to-income ratios, and there are asset classes outside residential real estate that don't require one highly leveraged wager on one local market staying perfect. The goal is optionality, more than one path forward. Fourth, stress test your solvency, not your feelings. The key isn't whether a price drop would be bad. The key is whether you'd still have options if it happened, because options are what prevent panic decisions. If you don't know your breakpoint, the market will eventually find it for you. Most of the time, they don't look like a disaster at first. They look like nothing. A slower weekend, a listing that doesn't move, a new building finishing but fewer people rushing in. And then, gradually, places start to feel different. Not because the scenery changed, because the people changed, because the math changed. So I'll leave you with the same question we started with, because it's the one that actually matters. If your home dropped 50% in value over the next 3 years, what would that do to your life? Would you still be solvent, still able to service the debt, still able to choose your next move, or would you be forced to decide under pressure? None of these places are ghost towns, not even close. But every ghost town once looked completely normal, and the shift usually starts quietly, gradually, almost invisibly, until it isn't.